Throughout the development of my game, it's been my job to play through the levels from start to finish to check for bugs, and I've been able to consistently beat every level. Now, as this multi-year project nears its finish, it's time for this to change. It's time for me to make a level that even I can't beat. It's time for the Chasm to present its final challenge. This is Into the Chasm, a fantasy dungeon crawler game with unique combat mechanics. It tells the story of a young warrior attempting to make it through the legendary chasm which separates the two halves of his world through 10 meticulously designed, engaging levels. 9 of these levels are complete, and my goal is now to make level 10 a culmination of everything that's come before, something you will dread entering because you know you are unlikely to come out alive. This process begins with something seemingly unrelated to the mysterious boss battle, a new type of enemy which is spread throughout every level in the game. These are the mystical towers. The original towers were created by a society of wizards, mages, and mystics far off in West Offland over 10,000 years ago. The ones found in the game are crude copies created by the mages of the chasm before they were exterminated. When left alone, these towers are benign, but since their deaths to their creators, they've become obsessed with self-preservation, using their powers against any living thing which approaches them, in this case, the player. There are 3 types of tower: the soul tower, the energy tower, and the elemental tower. Each one has its own ability which it uses to attack the player. The Soul Tower releases souls which chase the player until they are destroyed by contact with either the warrior or his sword. The Energy Tower shoots out bursts of energy at the player. Unlike the souls, the energy blasts don't have life and therefore do not follow the player but cannot be destroyed. The final type, the Elemental Tower, makes stalagmites which attempt to impale the warrior, as everyone knows that's what these things were designed for. I made some sound effects using a synthesizer, and the combination of these with the art and the mechanics made the towers my favorite thing I've added to the game in a long time. More importantly, they gave me a new danger to present to the player in level 10. Now, it was time to enter the final challenge. I had a few goals in mind when I began work on the boss battle. The first was to make the level scary. I achieved this by designing the early part of the level to be entirely empty of any enemies or other moving parts, while leaving signs that at some point in the past this area had been inhabited and had been used for sinister purposes. Adding to the psychological element of this level, I created this room. It contains nothing except a small area of void. Wondering about its purpose, the warrior enters the room and is immediately locked in. He soon understands the reason the void is there, so that he, having been foolishly lured in by the mystery, will have a way to leave. With the goal of fear accomplished, the next step was to make the level difficult. Really difficult. So difficult only the best of the best could succeed. I call this stage of the level Natural Selection, which is funny because every single thing here is supernatural. At the beginning of the Natural Selection stage, the player enters a chamber known as the Charles Darwin Memorial Atrium. In the atrium, you have to choose one of 3 paths. Each path has its own challenges designed to be equally difficult while being entirely different in style. Maybe you choose my personal favorite, the top path. It requires the player to navigate a hallway full of spiderwebs while attempting to evade attacks by all 3 types of mystical tower. If the player makes it through, they must make it through a similar room, except this time, instead of avoiding spiderwebs, you're stuck in a magical zone which reverses the inputs, making it far more difficult to dodge the attacks. When the warrior attempts to leave the zone, they'll find the only way out is through a boost performed while walking in the opposite direction. If you manage this, you can congratulate yourself. There's no more danger, for now. Perhaps you find this too challenging and try another way. The middle path is equally difficult. It consists of a long, narrow hallway whose entire floor is the void. The player must make it across on a fast-moving platform, but the room is full of walls blocking the way. You must weave your way through the gaps in the walls to avoid being forced off of the platform and into the void. Most cannot achieve this, even I find it hard. With nowhere else to turn, you go down. The bottom path is reserved for those few on the tails of the bell curve. Cowards who are not resourceful enough to try something new, and clever players who realize that this path is almost certainly the easiest path to success. The challenge is quite simple. Enter a large chamber full of dozens of enemies and fight your way to the exit on the other side. Having survived Darwin's revenge, the warrior now enters a room without enemies, full of resources with which to prepare for the rest of the level. Having healed and prepared, he exits the room into a long, windy passage. In order to succeed, you must run through the passage while being fired at by energy towers. The trick to the stage is to not overthink it, by which I mean you can beat it by simply running as fast as you can, although you're almost certain to take some damage. At this point, the warrior is tired, afraid of being destroyed by sheer volume of attacks, but the chasm isn't letting up. You approach a new room. You can tell that there are mystical towers nearby from the sound, but your attention is immediately drawn to the top of the room, where there are numerous pebble monsters trapped behind a wall of stone. You enter the room, and immediately the stone disappears, leaving you to search the room for a key, while avoiding the pebble monsters' attacks. You find the key and rush to the door, careful to evade the towers which are now targeting you. You rush through the door and step out into the void. The void is not here as an obstacle. It's here because the level is not yet complete. You have not won. As the level has no finish yet, there is no way to beat it. Instead, you stand there alone in the darkness, wondering what horrible trial the chasm, and its mysterious, sinister creator, will throw at you next. Please subscribe and leave any challenge ideas in the comments. And, of course, thank you for watching to the end.